want other people to suffer because you've suffered, but then not saying anything when big banks run off with your literal taxpayer money? That's a choice. Welcome back to Wine and Chill. I'm Stephanie, your favorite recovering lawyer, and today we're back with a student loan update. Specifically, we're going to Texas to review this Texas lawsuit against Joe's student loan forgiveness plan and an update on my six-figure student loan payoff journey. If you're new, every month I go over and share how much progress I'm making towards my six-figure student loan journey. In today's video, similarly to the last video that we did in October, we have a new lawsuit to discuss in regards to student loan forgiveness. So our quick agenda will be, we're going to go through my student loan payoff amount. Everything is retroactive, so this will be what I paid in October, as well as somebody asked last month, how much have I paid in total so far? So I actually made an Excel spreadsheet, did some digging because it wasn't easy to find. Which is interesting. I gave them hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, 100,000 plus some. You think they would make this easier. And then probably what you're here for, what the heck is going on with student loan forgiveness? Are your loans being forgiven? Is student loan forgiveness canceled? What is happening? We're going to get into that. My starting amount when I started to pay off my student loans back in February of 2020 was $304,680.17 trifling cents. That is inclusive of about $75,000 of interest. That is not all the interest though, as I learned that the hard way. In October, I paid a even $1,000, which brings my current balance down to $168,798.97 trifling cents. So far, because y'all wanted to know how much have I paid so far, I have paid an estimated in almost 3 years. So we're in November. In February of 2023, it'll be 3 years of my student loan payoff journey. I have paid an estimated $147,269.63 trifling cents. And the reason why that is an estimated and not exact is multiple. First and foremost, Fed Loan used to be my student loan financer, my student loan service provider. Sorry, my financier. Yeah. And they sold me off. They sold us all off. They hate that term. They literally sent a letter and said, your student loans are not being sold. They are being transferred. Anywho, they transferred my student loans a few months ago over to 8 Advantage, which is essentially just Navient under a different name. Child, I miss Fed Loan. If it's possible to miss a student loan service provider, I miss Fed Loan. The UI in 8 Advantage, raggedy. 8 Advantage has never even sent me an email. I had to just set the account up. When they did that, I was convinced, and I'm still convinced, that I downloaded an Excel spreadsheet of all of my payments I've ever made to Fed Loan. However, that spreadsheet seems to be somewhere lost in the abyss of my laptop and my million folders. So since I couldn't find it and say exactly how much I have paid, I had to go back through my bank statements and Wells Fargo, which I need to cancel. I've said this a million times. I really need to cancel that account because Wells Fargo was raggedy. Wells Fargo will only let you look back and give you an Excel file for 18 months. I've been paying off my student loans for longer than 18 months. So then I had to go into the bank statements, and then Chase Bank, which is the other bank account that I have, they will let you get an Excel file for 24 months. So thank you, Chase. That was a little bit easier. However, Wells Fargo, the online statements are easier to read versus, or the paper statements, I'm just looking at them online, are easier to read versus Chase Bank. Their statements are a little hard to read. So I put that together. According to the bank statements, and according to the Excel file that both of them gave me, I have paid $139,291.10 as of February 14, 2020. However, I graduated law school in good old 2016. I did not make a payment in 2016. I was in forbearance. And even after forbearance, I called Fed Loan crying and was like, I don't have a job, help me. And they're like, it's okay, girl, you could pay $0. And when I did finally get my first job out of law school in 2016, I didn't make enough money. They were like, you're poor, honey. You cannot afford a payment. So I actually was on income based, and my income base, my payment was $0, which in the short term was great because I didn't have to pay anything. In the long term, it's bad because your interest at that point continued to rack up. Currently now we're in forbearance, so your interest is at 0. My highest interest rate is 7.21% currently. I had a Sallie Mae student loan of 10%. So I know that $139,000 is not the total because I have this screenshot of when I finally paid off. There's no other thing to call her besides Sally Mae. I can't stand Sally Mae. I've talked about this numerous times, how the workers of Sally Mae have harassed me and harassed everyone, and they are just, what did Alfalfa say? The scum between my toes. I can't stand them. That's such a gross thing to say. You get the drift. When I did my spreadsheet, as you can see, the spreadsheet showed me that I had paid $5,887.80 trifling cents. The principal balance of the loan was $6,000. And I know for a fact that I paid in total $9,066.33 trifling cents. So the difference on that was $3,178.53 trifling cents. So I added that on, and that likely is not showing because the amounts that I pulled were from February 14th of 2020. This is not including my student loan payments in 2017, 2018, 2019. 2017, I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to lie to you. Some of my student loans from forbearance, some of them weren't. I wasn't paying on the regular. I couldn't afford it. I said this before. I didn't have my come to Jesus moment of like, oh, damn it. Till 2018, and I didn't really make enough money. I live in New York. New York is hell of expensive. Till 2020, and I was like, okay, cool. I can afford a roof over my head and these student loans. Let's start doing both. Because I didn't count the years where I was just making the minimum payment, estimated 2018, 2019 is $4,800 if I was paying $200 a month. I don't remember what the minimum payment was. I think it was a little bit more, to be honest, but I wanted to estimate on the low side. 2017, I barely made a student loan payment. It was low. In 2017, my first full-time job out of law school as an attorney working in entertainment, I made 30 grand. Child, I have no money. 30 grand living in the city is a humbling experience. And again, shout out to my grandparents for letting me live with them because that's the only way I could afford to even take that job. So that gives us an estimated $147,269.63 trifling cents paid off in almost 3 years. I would say it's probably a little bit higher. I feel like I've actually hit the 150 mark, but because for the life of me, I can't find that Fed loan file. Fed loan used to break it up for you and it would tell you, this is how much you've paid total. These are all the payments you've given to us. This is how much went to interest. This is how much went to your principal balance. The principal balance does include the capitalized interest, which is the interest you accrue while you're still in school. Grad plus student loans start accruing the day you sign for them, not the day you graduate. So that was included in the principal balance. That is changing under Joseph's new plan. However, I'm in the old plan. I'm in the old ways of you getting screwed from the get-go. So 147K, give or take, maybe 3 to 5 grand. That's where we're at. But I am glad, so I appreciate y'all asking this, because now I have an Excel spreadsheet where I'm tracking it. So I have always, every single time I've paid off a student loan, I had 22 student loans. I currently only have 3. I have all of those receipts that say loan paid in full. So nobody was ever going to tell me that I have missed a payment. But I'm sure I'll find that Excel spreadsheet right after I do this video, which will be great. After I spent all morning redoing it. But it's good to look through your bank statements because then I was seeing some habits of mine of like, oh, I see you was eating out over here, girl, when I know you didn't have any money in this time period. So always good to check yourself. Now, on to what you're really here for, which is talking about what the hell is going on in Texas. What is going on with student loan forgiveness? So, for context, if you are new, I do not qualify for student loan forgiveness. Unfortunately, because of the arbitrary income cap placed, your girl don't qualify. However, as someone who doesn't qualify, just because I have to suffer doesn't mean other people should have to suffer. So I am a big proponent of student loan forgiveness for everyone that qualifies and for everybody in general, because the cost of education should not be so predatory in this mother effing place. With that being said, Texas does not agree. So last month we talked about the Missouri case. There is a new case, and that case is in Texas, specifically in the federal district court. Judge Mark Pittman decided last week to rule and say, you know what? This is unlawful. Specifically, the HEROES Act, which the HEROES Act is the Higher Education Relief Opportunities for Student Act of 2003, which the Department of Education relied on the HEROES Act to say like, hey, we as the executive branch have the power to grant student loan forgiveness. The HEROES Act is also what has been used for student loan forbearance, the student loan pause this entire time. Judge Pittman said, "I disagree. Absolutely not. Y'all cannot have any money. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. I expect nothing less from a Trump-appointed judge. However, it's still disheartening. And specifically, the two people in Texas that decided to let the devil use them and decided to file this, they filed because one qualified for $10,000 and not $20,000, and the other one, her specific type of loan didn't qualify. So instead, they decided to let a Republican think tank or Republican group use them as the named plaintiffs for this case because they are disgruntled. I don't think they're that disgruntled. I think they're just trifling people. Particularly because the one named defendant actually had PPP loans and got all of his PPP loans forgiven. Clearly, he loves debt forgiveness, but only sometimes. How is this going to affect your student loan cancellation? Because the federal district court struck it down, student loan forgiveness has been put on pause. The Department of Education has, of course, appealed, as would be expected. However, the student loan application, if you didn't fill it out, about 26 million people filled it out. 16 million people, according to the Department of Education, their forgiveness was already approved. And the other 10 million, I guess they didn't process it yet. The application itself has been taken down by the Department of Education's website. They are currently putting that on hold. However, now we have two cases because there's also the case in Missouri that is sitting with the 8th Circuit Court. So to remind you back, in case you didn't watch that video, I'll link it right here. In Missouri, 6 Republican-led states decided to sue, stating that, listen, this will cause issues with who should be taxed, what should be taxed. We don't want this going forward. And the district court judge originally said, you don't have any standing. No one is actually being harmed. This is great for people. Remove yourself from my court. The 6 states then appealed. So now that is with the 8th Circuit. So we're saying a lot of things. There are a lot of different judges, a lot of different courts. Let's bring out a handy dandy graph really quick because this will be helpful. So this is our federal circuit court map. As you can see, this is from the government website. You'll see Missouri in the green is in the 8th Circuit. And then you see Texas in the mauve, brownish family is in the 5th Circuit. Essentially what happens, we have our federal court system. We're going to bring up another graph. This reminds me of how a bill gets made. Do y'all remember that from when we were little? So you have our federal court system and then you have the state court system. The federal court system is the U.S. district courts. And then you have the circuit court, which is the U.S. Court of Appeals. The Supreme Court is the final decision maker. And then state courts, you have state courts, state trial courts, which sometimes your state trial court, like in New York, is called the Supreme Court. It's very confusing. I don't know why they just don't change all the nomenclature to be the same. Then you have state appellate courts, and then you have the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court is the end-all be-all if you get all the way there. That graph was pretty. This graph is a little bit more detailed. I just think it's ugly. So that's why I didn't want to use it. But it gets the job done. There are also other courts. So where you see the United States Courts of International Trade, then you have the United States Court of Federal Claims. The United States Court of Federal Claims is essentially all of the state courts feed into that. So we don't have to worry about that. We're in federal court. So we're right in the middle. There are 94 United States district courts. So in New York, for example, we have SDNY, Southern District of New York. We have EDNY, Eastern District of New York. Western District of New York, I believe. In New York City, we have SDNY and EDNY sit down in New York City. Those all feed into the 12 United States Circuit Courts, the Court of Appeals. So those sit and those are basically multi-state. Now, this is important because what happens if the 8th Court, which is Missouri, and the 5th Court, which is the Texas case, what happens if they decide two different things? So if Missouri and the 8th Circuit Court says, yep, let it go through. And then Texas, when the 5th Circuit Court says, absolutely not, then we would have a circuit split. A circuit split is when two different circuits do not agree on the same legal question. Now, there are plenty of circuit splits. They don't always get resolved. However, because federal student loan forgiveness affects about 43 million Americans across a variety of states, a circuit split is not going to work. You just can't have a difference of opinion and say, well, if you're in Texas and these places, this is what's happening to you. Or if you're in Missouri, Wisconsin, Illinois, this is what's happening to you. One of the reasons why the Supreme Court exists is to sometimes at their discretion decide circuit splits. For the Supreme Court then would step in if they so choose and say, all right, we'll hear this case. It should be noted, the Supreme Court has already declined twice to hear any cases on student loan forgiveness so far. However, I would argue that's because there has been no circuit split after it goes through both the appellate processes of both circuits, so the 5th and the 8th. Then, depending on who loses on either one, the Department of Education is going to keep appealing, and these plaintiffs are likely going to keep appealing as well. Then the Supreme Court, when it gets to that level, can choose to hear the case. Now, this is similar to the affirmative action Supreme Court case that's going on right now, which we covered on Patreon. So if you missed that, go ahead and head over to Patreon, where one case is regarding Harvard, is in the 1st district. And then the second case was regarding UNC, and UNC, which is in North Carolina, is in the 4th district. Those two cases got consolidated and are now being heard by the Supreme Court as one consolidated case. I would guess most likely that will happen here. Now, in terms of timeline, what does that mean to you? That means this crap is going to drag on. I hate to say it, which is awful. And I think, in my opinion, to be honest, the dragging on of this is causing extreme anxiety for people. As somebody who's already come to terms with the fact that I don't get a red penny, it's very sad to me to see people try to figure out, okay, come January 1st, when we all have to start making our payments again, that's when payments kick in. If you have federal student loans, January 1, which is less than 2 months away at this point. Today's November 14th. Come January 1st, everyone needs to know, like, how does my budget look? Having a $200, $300, $400, $500, $600 payment versus no payment is two very different things. It's unfortunate. And at this point, I would say if there are people, you see them online being like, that's good, serves you right. You need to pay it. You borrowed it. Ignore them. They don't understand how interest works. I've said this a million times, and I'm happy to say it for the millionth and 1th time. $75,000 minimum, because I refuse to redo the math and upset myself, of my student loan payment is inclusive of interest, of money I did not borrow, money that I had no idea. There are people that have variable interest rates. It should be illegal for an 18-year-old to sign on to a variable interest rate just to simply get an education. It is predatory. So right now, we are essentially going to play a waiting game. As I said last time, our court system is notoriously slow. And even if they put this on an expedited track, this is likely going to drag on either to the end of the year or till next year. With that being said, if I could make a suggestion, making your budget as if your student loan payment is going to be whatever your minimum payment was before is probably going to give you the best peace of mind at this point. So at least it's not a shock come January 1st. It's not a shock to you that like, oh, I guess I have to pay this. This is awful, but here it is. You can. One of the good things that is available is if you choose to have an income-driven repayment plan, income-based repayment, you can submit your information for income-based repayment at any time. So if you've lost your job, you can log in and say, hey, I want an income-based, income-driven repayment plan, and you submit your information. They will then recalculate what your minimum payment is. To note, because no one ever told me this when I signed up for IDR back in the day, years ago, income-driven repayment, and there are different kinds. So there's repay, there's income-based sits under there. There are a bunch of different acronyms. Income-driven repayment plans will not help you pay your student loans off faster. Income-driven repayment plans will give you the lowest possible payment. So it will help you in the short term. In the long term, the old way is your interest would just continue to tack on. Under Joseph's new plan, the way it works is if your total payment every month is $500. And so you say, okay, I made the minimum payment, my $500 payment, but your interest is actually $1,000. So that means the old way, $500 would just tack on every month. Like, oh, you didn't pay the interest. Here you go. Tack it on. In the new way, that extra $500 isn't going to be added to your balance. However, you still haven't hit the principal. You can't hit the principal until you pay $1,001 in that scenario. And y'all know math is not my ministry, so we have to use the most basic math. Income driven is good if you foresee that, hey, you can't make a large monthly payment. The standard repayment plan is based on usually a 10-year term, and so the payment is very high. If you know, There's no way I could pay that. If I remember correctly, when I first graduated law school, my minimum payment that they told me I was going to have to make was over $2,000. There was no way. There was not a chance in hell that I could make that payment on $30,000 a year. Yeah, okay. Wasn't going to happen. So I signed up for income-based, income-driven. It's interchangeable. They keep changing it. Honestly, I don't remember the original one. Is good in the short term, but not necessarily the long term. If you make a long-term plan, it is fine. I am currently on income-driven repayment. I think I'm on repay. And the reason why it works is, for me personally, is because we haven't had interest in 2 years. With that being said, I'm rooting for y'all. I really, really, really hope that it's possible. The other option for this, and essentially what the Texas judge ruled was, hey, executive branch, you do not have the power under the HEROES Act to do this. You are circumventing Congress. Congress needs to do this. If the Dems have a majority in Congress and they all agree, which is saying something, and they vote together, they could technically get it passed. There are a lot of variables in that statement I just made, which is why voting is important. There are currently 118 federal judicial seats open, vacancies, waiting for a judge to be placed in them. The president appoints the judges, and then Senate confirms those judges, which is why a lot of these judges are appointed by Trump. The damage one can do in 4 years, wild. So we shall see. I'm sorry this is not more happy. Last video, I was so excited for y'all. I was really much more confident that this was going to go through, that there wouldn't be any issues. This video, to be honest, it's not looking too good, but that doesn't mean it's all the way over yet. So we'll see. There are some options. There is also the third option, which is there are certain attorneys, particularly those that have been advocating for debt relief, which are of the belief that the president has executive power to simply just write off the loans. Joseph is never going to do that. Let's be honest. So there's no point to even dwell on that. Should he do it? I think he should, but he's not going to do it. So it's either option A or option B. Option A is winning in the courts. Option B is then somehow getting Congress to agree. So both are very tenuous options. Tenuous at best. Let me know. How are you feeling? I'm rooting for y'all. I'm really, really hoping that this goes through. All right. On that note, I'll catch y'all in the next video.